Have you ever noticed that sometimes life seems to be preparing something special for you? Those moments when everything begins to align in a mysterious way, as if the universe were conspiring in your favor. Napoleon Hill dedicated years of his life to studying the behavioral and mental patterns of the world's most successful people and discovered something fascinating. There is a specific psychological process that precedes great achievements. Modern neuroscience confirms his observations through studies on neuroplasticity and brain activation patterns. When our brain is about to make a major change, it goes through specific phases of preparation that can be identified and understood. Hill observed that these phases follow a universal pattern, regardless of culture or time period. The human brain, according to neuropsychological research, has an opportunity detection system that activates when we are mentally and emotionally prepared to receive something significant. This system is not mystical or supernatural, it is pure behavioral science. Studies from Stanford University show that our perception of opportunities increases dramatically when we develop certain specific psychological traits. Hill identified these traits decades before formal science was able to map them neurologically. Mental preparation doesn't happen by accident. It follows precise psychological laws that can be understood and applied consciously. When you understand these laws, you can recognize the signs that something transformative is coming into your life. The first scientific sign that a great opportunity is approaching is related to what psychologists call constructive cognitive dissonance. Hill observed that successful people experienced periods of specific mental restlessness before their greatest achievements. Cognitive psychology research explains this phenomenon. Our brain begins processing possibilities even before our conscious awareness. You begin to feel a distinct dissatisfaction with your current situation, not a destructive dissatisfaction, but a restlessness that propels you forward. Neuroscientific studies show that this restlessness activates specific regions of the prefrontal cortex responsible for planning and visualizing possible futures. It's as if your subconscious mind begins preparing for something bigger, creating productive psychological tension. Hill noted that great entrepreneurs and leaders reported periods of mental hunger before their greatest discoveries. This hunger isn't desperation, it's intelligent anticipation. Your brain is literally rewiring itself, creating new neural connections that will be necessary to deal with the new reality that lies ahead. Neuroplasticity, a fundamental concept in modern neuroscience, explains how our brain adapts in advance to changes that haven't yet occurred. You may be feeling this constructive restlessness right now, and it could be a scientific indicator that your mind is preparing to receive something significant. The second pattern identified by Hill and confirmed by modern psychology is the sudden increase in perceived synchronicity. We're not talking about magic, but a well-documented psychological phenomenon called directed selective attention. When your brain is preparing for a major change, it automatically begins to filter information from the environment differently. You begin to notice connections, opportunities, and coincidences that were always there, but that your mind wasn't programmed to perceive. Research in perceptual psychology shows that our brain processes millions of bits of information per second, but our consciousness only perceives a tiny fraction of that. What changes is the criteria for selecting what reaches our awareness. Hill observed that people about to make major breakthroughs began to report more meaningful coincidences in their lives. The scientific explanation is fascinating. Your reticular activating system, the part of the brain that decides what deserves your conscious attention, is being reprogrammed by your new goals and expectations. It's like when you decide to buy a specific car and suddenly start seeing it everywhere. The car was always there, but your mind wasn't programmed to notice it. Similarly, opportunities begin to appear because your brain is finally calibrated to recognize them. This process of mental recalibration is a powerful behavioral indicator that you're aligning with greater possibilities. The third phase of the process involves what Hill called purpose magnetism, a phenomenon that social psychology today explains through the theory of interpersonal attraction based on values and goals. When you are genuinely aligned with a higher purpose, your unconscious behavior changes in subtle ways that are detectable by others. Studies in nonverbal communication show that people with a clear purpose emit specific behavioral signals: a more erect posture, more focused eye contact, a more stable tone of voice, and more confident language patterns. Hill observed that individuals about to receive great opportunities began to attract people and resources seemingly spontaneously. Social neuroscience explains this through the concept of emotional contagion, our unconscious ability to detect and be influenced by other people's mental states. When you are genuinely aligned with a higher purpose, you unconsciously transmit signals of confidence and direction that others perceive and are attracted to. It's not manipulation, it's authenticity. Your nervous system is literally in a different state, and this is perceptible to others on a subliminal level. Platforms like YouTube are perfect examples of how this magnetism works in practice. Authentic creators aligned with their purpose naturally attract engaged audiences, while those who just do it for the sake of it struggle to get genuine attention. Hill identified a critical moment in the process, what he called the test of applied faith. Modern behavioral psychology describes this as tolerance of uncertainty, a measurable psychological capacity that separates people who can handle great opportunities from those who sabotage themselves when they arise. Research shows that our comfort zone isn't just about external circumstances, but about our neurological capacity to process novelty and uncertainty. When a truly great opportunity approaches, it inevitably comes with uncertainty and risk. Your brain, wired for survival, interprets this as a potential threat and activates avoidance mechanisms. Hill observed that successful people developed a specific ability to remain functional and make effective decisions even in states of high uncertainty. Studies in cognitive neuroscience show that this can be trained by strengthening connections between the prefrontal cortex and the limbic system. The ability to maintain mental clarity when the stakes are high isn't a natural gift. It's a developable psychological skill. When you can remain calm and focused when faced with a great opportunity, rather than being overcome by anxiety or fear, you demonstrate that you are psychologically prepared to handle it. This is often the final test before something significant manifests in your life. Mentally preparing to receive something big involves developing what Hill called applied faith, which modern psychology identifies as domain-specific self-efficacy. It's not blind optimism, but confidence based on real competence and adequate preparation. Albert Bandura, a pioneer in self-efficacy research, demonstrated that our confidence in our ability to perform specific tasks is the best predictor of actual success. Hill observed that people about to receive great opportunities had developed a specific, calibrated confidence. They knew exactly what they were capable of and had internal evidence to support that confidence. This is different from arrogance or fantasy. It's a realistic assessment of one's capabilities based on genuine experience and preparation. Neuroscience shows that self-efficacy activates specific regions of the brain associated with problem solving and persistence. When you genuinely believe you can handle something, your brain literally works differently. It processes information more efficiently and maintains focus for longer periods. Hill emphasized that this confidence needed to be built gradually through small victories and consistent preparation. It's not something you can simply decide to have. It needs to be developed through action and real evidence. When you feel calm, reality-based confidence in your ability to handle greater opportunities, it indicates that you are psychologically prepared to receive them. One of the most fascinating aspects of Hill's work is his observation of the principle of anticipatory preparation. He noticed that successful people began preparing for opportunities before those opportunities even clearly manifested. Cognitive psychology explains this through the concept of anticipatory processing, our mental ability to simulate future scenarios and prepare for them. Neuroimaging studies show that when we visualize and mentally prepare for future situations, our brain activates the same regions that would be activated in the real situation. This means that mental preparation is literally neural preparation. Hill observed that individuals on the verge of major breakthroughs intuitively began developing skills and knowledge that would be needed, even without knowing exactly how they would use them. It's as if there were an unconscious intelligence guiding their preparation. The scientific explanation is that our brain constantly processes faint environmental signals about possible future directions and adjusts our preparation behaviors. If you've been feeling urges to learn new skills, make new contacts, or prepare in ways that don't make immediate logical sense, this may be your brain detecting emerging opportunities. Advanced preparation isn't paranoia or anxiety, it's adaptive intelligence. When you trust this intuition and prepare appropriately, you position yourself to be ready when the opportunity clearly presents itself. Hill spent years studying what happens to people's mental energy during transitional periods before major achievements. He identified what he called directed mental focus, a specific psychological state that neuroscience now recognizes as sustained executive attention. This isn't just ordinary concentration, but a special kind of focus that integrates multiple cognitive functions. Neuropsychological research shows that this state involves coordination between several brain regions: the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex for attentional control, the anterior cingulate for conflict monitoring, and the parietal cortex for spatial orientation of attention. You enter a mental state that Hill described as single-directed mind. In this state, distractions naturally lose their power over you, not through effort or struggle, but because your mind is genuinely captured by something more meaningful. Studies on flow and high-performance states confirm that this type of focus isn't forced. It's drawn by authentic purpose. Hill observed that people on the verge of major breakthroughs reported periods where working toward their goals became almost effortless, not because it was easy, but because there was complete alignment between their capabilities and their challenges. This mental state is a powerful indicator that you're approaching something significant, because it represents psychological integration, all parts of your mind working toward the same goal. Hill's most profound observation about the process of receiving something great involves what he called resistance reversal. He noticed that often, just before a great opportunity presented itself, people went through a period where old obstacles seemed to intensify. Developmental psychology explains this through the theory of behavioral extinction. When you're changing deep patterns, your psychological system often intensifies old ones in an unconscious attempt to maintain homeostasis. It's as if your psyche is testing whether you're truly committed to the change. Research on behavioral change shows that this phenomenon is predictable and, in fact, a positive sign that real change is happening. Hill observed that people who understood this process weren't discouraged by this temporary intensification of challenges. Instead, they recognized it as confirmation that they were on the right track. Neuroplasticity explains why this happens. When you're creating new neural patterns, old patterns fight for dominance before being integrated or replaced. Understanding that intensifying obstacles can be a sign of progress being closer, not further away, is crucial to staying on course during these critical periods. When you can maintain consistency during this increased resistance phase, you demonstrate that you are truly ready for the next level. Hill identified a fascinating psychological pattern he called emergent clarity, moments when the direction to follow becomes not only obvious, but inevitable. Cognitive neuroscience explains this phenomenon through the concept of sudden insight moments, when complex connections are instantly formed in our minds, creating understandings that seem to come out of nowhere. Neuroimaging studies show that true insights activate specific regions of the brain associated with the integration of complex information. Hill observed that people on the verge of major breakthroughs often reported moments of sudden clarity where they not only knew what to do, but felt an internal compulsion to act. This is different from impulsivity. It is the integration of conscious and unconscious processing, resulting in clear direction. Decision-making research shows that our best decisions often emerge when we can integrate rational analysis with intuitive processing. Hill emphasized that these moments of emergent clarity needed to be respected and followed, even when they didn't make complete logical sense at the time. The scientific explanation is that our brains often process complex information below the level of consciousness and present integrated conclusions as sudden insights. When you experience genuine clarity about a specific direction, especially if it involves significant growth or contribution, it can be a sign that you are receiving internal guidance for an emerging opportunity. One of the most practical aspects of Hill's work involves recognizing what he called opportunities in disguise. He observed that great opportunities rarely arrive in the form we expect. They often initially present themselves as problems, challenges, or situations that seem inconvenient. Cognitive psychology explains this through the concept of functional fixedness, our tendency to see things only from a familiar perspective, missing alternative possibilities. Hill studied hundreds of cases where people nearly missed transformative opportunities because they didn't look like they expected. The ability to recognize opportunities in disguise requires what psychologists call cognitive flexibility, the ability to shift mental perspectives quickly when the situation demands it. This can be developed through conscious practice and looking at situations from multiple angles. Hill emphasized that problems often contain seeds of equivalent or greater opportunities. Creative neuroscience confirms that our greatest insights often emerge when we are forced to think beyond our usual categories. When you develop the ability to see possibilities where others see only problems, you exponentially multiply your chances of recognizing and seizing significant opportunities. This is a mental muscle that can be strengthened through deliberate practice and looking for positive or helpful aspects in challenging situations, not as forced positivity, but as realistic strategic analysis. Hill paid special attention to what happens to people's value systems when they are preparing to receive something big. He observed that what he called automatic value refinement often occurs a process where priorities become clearer and superficial values naturally lose importance. Moral developmental psychology explains this through theories of value system evolution. As we grow psychologically, our values tend to become more integrated and contribution-oriented. Research shows that people experiencing significant growth often report spontaneous shifts in their priorities, not through conscious effort, but through a natural expansion of perspective. Hill noticed that individuals on the verge of great opportunities automatically began to value quality over quantity, contribution over consumption, growth over comfort. This refinement isn't forced moralism, it's natural psychological evolution. Social neuroscience shows that when our sense of self expands to include greater purpose, brain regions associated with empathy and long-term vision become more active. It's impossible to be truly prepared for something big while maintaining small values. When you notice spontaneous shifts in your priorities, less interest in social drama, more focus on real growth, less tolerance for non-value-added activities, it may indicate that you are internally aligning with greater possibilities. This process of refining your values is both a sign of and a preparation for more meaningful opportunities. Now we come to a crucial point in Hill's analysis: the role of intelligent persistence versus blind persistence. He observed that successful people developed a specific ability to distinguish between resistance that must be overcome and resistance that contains important information. Cognitive psychology calls this metacognition, the ability to think about our own thought processes and adjust them based on feedback. Hill emphasized that true persistence is not stubbornness, it is strategic flexibility maintained over time. Evolving research shows that our ability to maintain focused effort while remaining open to changing strategies is one of the best predictors of success in complex challenges. When you are genuinely aligned with something big, you develop what Hill called elastic persistence, of firmness in the goal combined with flexibility in methods. Neuroplasticity explains why this works. Keeping the goal stable allows your brain to optimize strategies over time, while methodological rigidity interrupts this optimization process. Hill observed that people on the verge of breakthroughs often went through periods where they needed to significantly adjust their strategies, but they never lost clarity about their fundamental goals. If you're feeling the need to adjust your methods while maintaining clarity about your overall direction, it could be a sign that you're approaching a more effective way to achieve something significant. YouTube is full of examples of creators who had to adjust their strategies multiple times before finding their winning formula, but who remained consistent in serving their audience. Hill identified a specific moment in the process that he called preparation convergence, when internal capabilities, external opportunities, and timing align almost magically. Complex systems theory explains this phenomenon through the concept of emergence, when multiple elements interact in such a way that the result is greater than the sum of the parts. This moment of convergence cannot be forced, but it can be prepared for and recognized. Research on opportunity timing shows that our ability to recognize and act on moments of convergence is a developable skill. Hill observed that successful people developed a special sensitivity to detect these moments of alignment. It's like surfers who develop an intuition for perfect waves. They don't create the waves, but position themselves to ride them when they arise. The neuroscience of intuition shows that our brain constantly processes complex patterns and can detect convergences before our conscious mind understands all the elements involved. When you feel like the time has come for something, especially if that feeling is accompanied by practical opportunities and you feel genuinely prepared, this may be your intuitive system detecting true convergence. Hill emphasized that these moments require courage to act, because true convergence often involves leaving known security to embrace unknown possibility. The ability to recognize and act in moments of convergence is one of the most valuable skills you can develop. To conclude this in-depth analysis of Napoleon Hill's work, it's essential to understand that all these patterns and signals are not automatic guarantees, but scientific indicators that can guide your preparation and recognition of opportunities. Modern psychology confirms that real growth requires both theoretical understanding and consistent practical application. Hill spent decades studying patterns of success not to create magic formulas, but to identify real psychological principles that can be consciously applied. Current neuroscience validates many of his observations, showing that genuine success involves measurable changes in how our brains process information, make decisions, and maintain focus. If you've recognized some of these patterns in your own experience, it may indicate that you're in the process of preparing for something significant. Remember, recognizing the signs is only the first step. You still need to maintain consistent preparation, develop relevant skills, and have the courage to act when opportunities present themselves. Hill consistently emphasized that knowledge without action is useless. The principles we explore today require dedicated application to produce results. If this content resonated with you, consider subscribing to the channel to continue deepening your understanding of mental development and realizing potential. The path to achieving something great is scientific, practical, and accessible to anyone willing to apply these principles with dedication and intelligence.